Welcome to my final project presentation. My name is Maria Gonzalez, and I will be presenting on microscopic derivation of an ideal gas, because that's the best name I could find to describe what I'm about to present. Um, so this is a final project for StatMech or Physics 311. And all the stuff I'm gonna talk about, it's really based on the book SETNAS, Statistical Mechanics, Entropy, Order Parameters, and Complexity. First, we need to know what's an ideal gas as an introduction for what I'm about to present you. So an ideal gas is a theoretical model of a gas. So it's just a large number of non-interacting particles, and we are describing it in a box specifically. We imagine that we have n tiny particles, atoms, molecules inside a box, and they move around freely, obeying Newton's law. They don't interact with each other at all, no interaction or repulsion. They just move straight in straight lines until they will hit a wall and bounce off. And all the energy in the system is also kinetic, so just movement. There's no potential energy because there's no forces between particles. So this is what makes it ideal, like helium at lower pressures. And why? Well, because molecules don't encounter, they kind of ignore each other when the pressure is really, really low. So now, why do we care about this idealized model if we do not really see it in like nature? So basically because we can really study a lot of stuff from it. So with this minimal setup, we can recover the laws of thermodynamics. Things like pressure, temperature, even entropy, this all emerge from the motion of particles bouncing the walls. So here we can see what other people call the ideal gas equation, or ideal gas law. So it's just PV equals NKT. K can be basically any specific constant. B pressure, B volume, and the number of particles, T is temperature. But yeah, again, K in this case can be Boltzmann constant just because we are studying particles. But normally in chemistry, you would look at moles or like basically to get it in moles instead of number of particles because we use moles. But yeah. So now that we understand what's an ideal gas, the next question would be then, how do we describe the behavior of all these particles in the box? So tying up with ideal gas, we could derive pressure, temperature and temperature from particles bouncing around. But there's a thing, so these particles can move in chaos, yes, at any moment. They're all over the place with different velocities and positions. But we would need then a tool other than Newton's law, because that applies to one particle, to be able to see or predict how they will all interact or behave. And that's where we use statistical mechanics. So instead of tracking each particle, we describe the probability of finding the system in different configurations. So, and the first tool we can use is the microcanonical symbol. So let's say we take a box with fixed energy, volume, and number of particles. So EBN. The system must be insulated. And also we assume that every possible microscopic configuration or microstate that satisfies those conditions are equally likely. So why? Since we have a constant energy, we assume all the particles could be moving around with a total energy of E because it's constant. So we kind of treat them the same. This is what's called a symbol at the end, a collection of this allowed states at the specific conditions. The number of possible microstates is called omega, but people also could take it as multiplicity. But another definition of it is that it's also known as the volume of phase space, which I do understand as like this Cartesian coordinate or just a coordinate with like axes that instead of, for example, x and y, we would have positions and momentum. And that satisfies the condition of Hamiltonian, where the Hamiltonian is just the energy function of the system. From that, we define entropy using Boltzmann's famous formula, which I have down here. So entropy will be then defined as a number of microscopic ways we can arrange the system while keeping its macroscopic properties the same. To kind of illustrate that idea, that's a little sort of counter. Now that we kind of understand what's an ideal gas and how we describe its state using the microcanonical symbol, let's take one of the most fundamental microscopic properties, just pressure, and then we can just kind of tie back that microscopic origin. So at the molecular level, pressure is nothing but the cumulative effect of this many tiny particles colliding in the walls of a specific container, for example. So when a particle hits the wall, its perpendicular component of the momentum kind of reverses. So for example, if I have this in 1D, this translates that the positive Bx momentum and the negative bx momentum, right? It's the same b is momentum. That's the change in the momentum, which means a force was applied over a time interval. So using Newton's second law, we express pressure as force per unit area, as we see here, which can be also rewrite as the rate of momentum transfer per unit area. So each particle basically hitting the wall also contributes a change in momentum of 2m bx, which again, if we average over many particles and assume a velocity distribution of kinetic theory, we get then here the average down here. And with some math, I presented this because with some math, we can get actually what we saw before, which is the ideal gas law, which is so cool because we derived it from principles. But kind of to see a better view of this, we can just take one of the problems of the Setnas book. I took 3.4 because I think it really tied on what I wanted to present, related with ideal gas at the end. But yeah, it's called pressure simulation. So instead of just reading all this, summarize, we're going to derive the pressure from a microscopic point of view. So we'll imagine a box filled with gas particles, and we'll focus on a wall at position x equals to L. So let's see number one, okay? So let's recall, right? Pressure is force per unit area. And we saw before that it can also be rewritten as the change in momentum per unit time, right? So in this setup, gas particles move around and sometimes collide with the wall. Every time one hits the wall, it bounces back elastically, meaning the x momentum flips from plus bx to minus bx. So that's what we see in reading about collisions. So the change in momentum of the particle is down here then, will be minus 2px. And that's why the wall then will gain 2px from each collision. So now we define BC px down here as a number of collisions per unit time per unit momentum interval with momentum bx. So if we want the total force, we sum all over the possible incoming momentum. That's what we do here with the integral. So finally, we know this down here, what I told you before about Newton's law. And if we divide the area to get the pressure, then we will get this integral right here. And if we kind of just simplify this, we will get a microscopic definition of the pressure, as this question kind of asks us. So for part B, it's kind of more complicated because they're saying, okay, show the theory. Now from the theory, do and practice and get a simulation from this theoretical example. So I took a time to do this, but now that we're reading down the formula for pressure using the collision rate that we talked about, it's this right here. Let's talk about how this connects to the simulation. In our code, basically I literally I kept watching particles hit the wall and keeping track of how much momentum they bring with them. So each time a particle hits the wall, we record its momentum, and then at the end we make a histogram showing how many hits we saw at each momentum value. So that's what the bars in the histogram represent, counts of collision grouped by how fast the particles were going to that x direction. Because again, this is all 1D. But here's the subtle kind of thing. The formula we wrote earlier used rate, right? Not really countings. So that means that it tells us how many collisions per second happen at a given moment, momentum px. So how we could compare this formula to our histogram? Well, we just needed to scale the theoretical rate by how long we observe the system and how wide each momentum beam is. So that gave us this formula right here, which is the one that I call it for the histogram. So px is just how many collisions we could expect per second per unit momentum. And then for delta t, that's how many seconds we watch. And then p delta p, then is the width of each momentum beam. So multiplying those three give us a number of collisions we expect to land in that beam. So that's exactly what we plotted here in the histogram. So for part C, this is also a law, this is a derivation. Basically, they're asking us how to make this simulated system to tie it up with what we know about ideal gas law. So now that we have talked about particles bouncing and transferring momentum, again, let's tie it with ideal gas and the famous PB equals and constant T using only microscopic reasoning. So let's say we are standing next to the right wall of the box and we are watching carefully. We want to ask how many particles will actually hit the wall in that small slice of time. So delta T. And from those, how much momentum they will transfer. So let's say with a single particle that has some x momentum, we'll call it px. The particle is going to move at speed px over m, right? So in time delta t, it will move a distance px over m times delta t. That means only particles that are close to the wall are hidden toward it. It can possibly hit the wall at the next delta t seconds. So anyone farther away is just would not get in time. They will not really. There's not really probable they will hit it before the other ones. So now imagine slicing off a little sliver of gas near the wall, a thin region of thickness delta x. So how many particles are in that slice and have the right momentum to hit the wall? Well, we know from statistical mechanics that the probability of a particle having a particular momentum px is given by the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution. So that bell curve centered to 0, you know that. So the density of particles of momentum px then will be given by that. So now we just multiply that by the sliver's volume, so A times delta x. And now we get how many particles with momentum px will be hitting that wall in time delta t. So that gives us this right here. So at this part, we have the rate of collisions at the wall for the particular momentum px. All right, so now let's use this to calculate the pressure. So now, from earlier here, we know that the formula for pressure was this one right here. If we plug in what we got in our full expression for PC dx, we will get this down here. Cool thing. So let's cancel out stuff. And since, you know, delta t is arbitrary because we have to figure out the rate and drop it too, so that leaves us with this right here. And it's just a great integral. We know that this integral right here, it's a Gaussian integral. So after we do stuff with it, we came up with this. And then after simplifying stuff, we get basically the ideal gas equation. So it's actually really cool. I found this problem really cool, actually. But yeah. So since I really wanted to expand these topics, from the simulation that the problem kind of makes you do, I tried to export this to BMD to be able to actually simulate this. As I told you, basically this is a simulation that I modeled with 200 particles inside of a one-dimensional box of length 10. So each particle starts at random position and it's given an initial momentum drawn from the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution we talked about at temperature T equal to 1. I basically made everything equal to 1 because it was simple, which captures the natural spread of the speeds at this thermal system. So the cool part is that technically, as I told you, this is a 1D system. So I added fake vertical y-axis or coordinates. I just kind of spread y coordinates along with the ones that I was getting from the simulation. And in this way, I was able to display it in a 2D environment to be able to actually see it and export it to BMD. Otherwise, it was just like all stacked on top of each other and we would not be able to see what's happening. But yes, at every time step, we updated the position at each particle using Newton's second law right here. And it's basically all position plus velocity times delta t. When particle hits the right wall, it reflects elastically. Its momentum then, again, it's reversed. And then we record a momentum transfer, which is 2px. This transfer is what builds up pressure over time. To visualize the BMD simulation, we can just like see it now. I do believe it's really cool. But yeah, I just like recycle what I had for the histogram, and then I just try to export or kind of save those trajectories to be able to have like a XYZ file, and then I exported that to BMD because I struggled trying to use MD track from the Python library, so that's why I ended up using this. You can see it. So also to expand even more this topic and illustrate even more in ideal gas, I simulated the free expansion of an ideal gas into a vacuum. So we started by placing 300 particles. At the beginning, I did 200 as the one that I got before, but I just thought that 300 looked good enough and didn't spend too much time running. So that's why I did 300 particles. Into the left half of the 2D box, each assign a random velocity sampled from a Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution, as I mentioned before. So the box has those reflected walls, so particles bounce off boundaries, but there's not like a barrier separating left and right, meaning that the right side is actually empty, like a vacuum. So at the beginning of the simulation, all the particles are confined to the left side, so I can actually show you. But over time, they're naturally spread out and fill the entire volume. So this spontaneous spreading is called free expansion, and there's no really a force driving it. There's not a piston anywhere, just the particle's random thermal motion. And the important point is that while each particle motion is governed by the time reversible Newtonian mechanics, the overall system evolves from a highly ordered system, low entropy, to a much, probable disordered one. And that's because there are far more ways to arrange particles uniformly across the box that are to keep them all confined in just one side. So we visualize this numerically by dividing the box into a grid and calculating the entropy at each time step using this formula right here. So where this log of rho I is just a fraction of the particles at each grid cell. So early on, particles are concentrated in just few cells, so entropy is low. But as the system evolves, the particle distribution becomes more uniform, and pi or rho I becomes more evenly spread, and the entropy increases until it levels off, indicating equilibrium. So this illustrates the second law of thermodynamics. Systems tend to evolve toward macrostates with the largest number of microstates. So the entropy increases not just because particles want to spread out, but it's because it's statistically spread out configurations are really, really, really likely. And this process is effectively irreversible. So not because physics kind of doesn't want to make it that, or it's just like forbid or something. It's because it's just not really probable. It might not really happen. So the simulation kind of makes this abstract idea of expansion more visible. And I just wanted to kind of like be able to do that. And also I also prepared like a little graph here, which kind of illustrates how from this same system, how actually the entropy is increasing. And from that, I used this equation right here to be able to compute this, which I think it's super cool. So now that we have seen how gases spread and entropy increases, it's worth asking, why do the simulations actually work? Why is it valid to simulate a single box of particles and then make broad thermodynamic claims about pressure, temperature, entropy using T equal 1? Why does this work? The answer lies in a powerful concept of statistical mechanics that we have seen a lot in class, so ergodicity, a system that is ergodic if over time explores all the microstates consistent with its total energy. So that means that time averages, what we see when we run a long simulation, are the same as assemble averages, which assume we know every possible configuration. So that's the key assumption when we use microdynamical assembles, that simulating just one representative system over time gives results that reflect the whole assemble of possibilities. So for example, when we were looking at the particle in a box simulation, we started with all particles confined to the left. And then after the simulation ran, they spread out, bounced it around, and eventually reach an uniform, seemingly random distribution. And the final state is equilibrium. So uncritically, it doesn't matter how we started, whether the particles were in the corner or moving fast or slow, because I tried moving slow and faster, and they were always kind of, regardless of the initial conditions, they will always get to the same kind of equilibrium microstate, maybe not all the same, but they all kind of look the same. So I think it's really cool how you can have initial conditions, whatever they are, and then you will get a just kind of uniformly disordered, even though that sounds weird, system that only wants to spread and maximize entropies. I think that's really cool. So yeah, to wrap everything up, this project was kind of took us from what might look like chaos, hundreds of particles moving randomly, bouncing around in a box. But it's not just noise. Behind the motion, we discovered structure, and we saw that pressure, a quantity we usually measure, can actually be derived from simple Newtonian collisions and also statistical mechanics. And we saw how entropy increases not just because some mysterious force and just because, I don't know, it's disorder and because we don't know something, but it's because the system has more microscopic ways to spread out and then stay confined. And then also we saw these principles are rooted from microscopic work led to naturally to the macroscopic behaviors described by equations like the ideal gas one. So I just think it's really cool we get to simulate this kind of things, and that I got to kind of learn enough to be able to simulate them and understand what's happening and how is it working. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much, and I really hope you liked it and you enjoyed it, and you're having a great flight. And I hope you got a really great time in Japan. So sure, thank you. Bye.